Thank you all so much for being here. This is great. As you know, just for clarification, I'm Asher Nelson, that's Riley Owens, and we're honored to present to you PCI and Compliance and the critical importance of cybersecurity. So, you may be wondering, what's the spider about, right? There's a few keys, web, and the spider, which has a keyhole in it. Now, this spider, I would like you to see it as your business for a second, and all of the legs as devices connected to your business. Each one of these devices is on a string, and each one of those strings is connected to a key, and that's a source of insecurity, which is a danger to your entire spider, because if it gets onto one leg, your entire spider is done. So this presentation, I hope, will give you sort of a barrier to protect your spider with. Let's move on to our agenda.
So in this presentation, we're going to be covering PCI compliance, what and why it's important, cybersecurity threats, and protective measures you can use to minimize risk. So first of all, what is PCI compliance? So it is a standard that you are required to follow if you take credit or debit cards or any online payments in your business. So there are kind of like three main portions of it. So we've got data protection measures, so things like a firewall and using strong passwords. And then we have security software and updates, so antivirus software, any software you might need to help minimize risk and protect against things, and then regular security updates. And then access controls and monitoring, which is mainly just the cybersecurity portion, making sure that people in your business only have access to the files they need. So this PCI standard, it's for you, right? So it is just meant to protect your reputation with your customers, your reliability, and to help build a strong security foundation for your business to sit on top of.
Right, so let's move on to one data protection measure, as listed in previous slides. So, passwords. There are two categories for passwords typically. You have your strong buff boys, and then you have your lanky gym bros. So, we're gonna start off with some strong combinations. So, with strong passwords, you'll typically see lengthy passwords, so 14 plus characters. You will see non-dictionary words, so if you have a word for your husband, like Pookie Pookums, throw it in there. It's not Merriam-Webster. And passphrases. So if your original password was ice cream lover 95, you could make it I love ice cream and replace some of the letters with numbers, etc. With weak passwords, you have short sequences, or anything less than 14 characters. You have your keystroke patterns, or if you rub your hand across the keyboard, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or QWERTY. And then personal information, which is open source intelligence, anything that a hacker can search on you on Google. So here's a password graphic for 2023 using ChatGPT. Now, the story behind this is actually a little interesting. A couple months ago, when we first started this slideshow and we were thinking of ways to explain passwords, Anne gave us a 2022 graphic on passwords. And in that graphic, it said that 8-character passwords were generally the standard. Now, that was in the past, approximately 1 year in the past, but now it's the present day. And as you can see, 8-character passwords are no longer utilizable, or at least secure. What you're going to be wanting to look at is 14 and above. So with 14 in numbers only, it's instantly. But over here, with numbers, upper and lowercase letters, and symbols, your 14-character password will be cracked in 47 years. Now, that's nice and all, but we recommend that you use 18 characters with numbers, uppercase and lowercase letters, and symbols, because by the time they crack it, the sun will envelop us. Phishing, right? You've all probably gotten some form of phishing. Now, the sport phishing and the cyber phishing are actually kind of similar, But instead of phishing for fish, you're phishing for personally identifiable information, or PII. Now, phishing attacks are statistically dangerous. Approximately 98% of cyber attacks originate from a phishing attempt. There are multiple types, so email, call, SMS, and even a QR code, right? That's crazy. But there is a way, a QR code. It's crazy, right? But there is a way to minimize the risk. Every 90 days, it is required by PCI that you provide you and your employees with cyber awareness training so that you don't click on that link. In fact, some companies even test their employees, sending them phishing emails.
So here is an example of a phishing email that I got not too long ago. It was sent, said it was coming from FedEx, and you can see that I reported it as spam because I circled in red a couple red flags for the email. So the first one is at the top. It says Riley Owens, all one word. That is not my name. It's Riley, and then Owens is my last name. The emojis are not professional, and FedEx would not be sending you an email with emojis in the subject line. And then at the bottom, it's a little small, but delivery is spelled incorrectly. So at the top, it's spelled correctly. At the bottom, it's not. So inconsistencies like that are also common in phishing emails. And then one other thing you can do to check is at the top underneath where it says FedEx, it's circled in blue. It says to me with a little arrow. If you click on that, it tells you the email it's coming from and who it was sent to. And so you can see the email on the right side is not a FedEx email. It is, I can't even pronounce that. It's just a whole bunch of letters. So those are a couple ways that you can try to identify those phishing emails. So speaking of phishing, American Airlines was a phishing breach, happened in July of 2022. And it was a violation of PCI because there were things that were personally identifiable information, things like names, birthdays, addresses, driver's license numbers, and even some medical information was breached in here. So it was very expensive for American Airlines to try to remedy this. They had to spend about $1,200 per person that was affected for cybersecurity protection. And then it was estimated that they ended up spending about $1.2 million for all of the people, and that's just for the people that were affected. So that was not very good for them. All right, here is something we found. It was a Canva breach that happened in 2019. And so it was something that happened, and we learned about this when we started working with Anne to put together this presentation. So she told us about dark web search, and so did Kim as well. And we were like, okay, well, everyone at CAPS uses Canva, and a lot of the instructors use Canva as well, and we all have accounts with our CAPS emails. So we were just curious. So we thought, why don't we just type it in, just because we wanted to see what was going to happen. And little did we know that we were going to have a whole list of emails that were breached. So this is just one page. There's about 3 or 4 more pages full of emails. And so it gives you the email that was breached. It's got some passwords. And then it tells you where it came from. So this one was from the data breach. And then this person actually has a keylogger on their system, and we'll talk a little bit about those later. And you can see over on the right side, it says PII hit. So you only need 3 pieces of personal identifiable information to steal an identity. So a couple of them say 1, but there's a lot of 3s there. So all of those people could have their identity stolen because of this breach. So we just thought that was something interesting and something good to look at.
Was yours on there?
No, mine was not on there. It was before my time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Well, certainly trailing off of that, we have the types of malware. Now, keylogger, you heard in the last page. We'll get to that in a second. So first, I'd like to explain ransomware. Ransomware is a type of malware that's installed in your computer that encrypts data. So you may open a file and find that it's encrypted, and that it requires a key. Now, this key, you can get this key, but you have to pay money for it. And typically, because hackers can look at your bank account information, they know exactly how much money is in your bank account. They're basically milking you for all you're worth. But even if you do pay the amount of money that they ask you to pay, there's no guarantee that you will get your information back. After all, a thief is still a thief. Next, a keylogger. Now, a keylogger is pretty peculiar. This type of malware installed in your computer tracks every single key press that you make. So not only is it targeting emails and passwords, but any personally identifiable information that you type in, it can steal your banking information, it can steal your social security number, and it's very easy for your identity to be stolen. And third, silent malware, which might be the scariest. This type of malware is installed on your computer, but chances are you won't even know it's there. It can be years without you knowing that silent malware is installed on your computer. It's particularly hard to find. I mean, not that ransomware or keyloggers aren't, but this one is just a little bit more defensive. Luckily, you can protect against all of these with ring fence. Now, ring fencing is ensuring that only trusted programs are installed on your computer. So a system to make this work or happen would be a, least privilege system. So a system of least privilege would be if you give your employee admin access. Why? Why would you do that, right? They only need the least amount of privilege to work. So Riley's going to talk to you a little bit about the Move It data breach, which was ransomware.
Yes, so as Asher said, this was a ransomware breach, and it was actually reported just this year as when it happened, May of 2023. So there were over 1,000 companies that were affected by this breach. Things like gas station chains, universities, Missouri Medicaid, and it was more recently found that the entire state of Maine was also breached. Actually the entire
That's
state
not
of
an
Maine.
analogy. It's literally the state of Maine.
The entire state of Maine was actually breached. And it was really bad for them. Maine's ending up spending trillions of dollars to protect their citizens after this sort of breach. And it was reported on computerweekly.com that MoveIt has spent about $1 million as of October on this breach, and that number is going to continue rising because there's still ongoing lawsuits against them for all of the information that was lost. So if you know anyone in Maine, have connections in Maine or something, I would maybe reach out to them, let them know that they might have been affected, or if you know anyone who's on Missouri Medicaid, they might also have been breached as well.
Right. Off of that, we have denial of service or DOS attacks. Now, I like to think of this better as denial of access attacks. Now, denial of service attacks happen when you have an internet packet flood. But a way to think of this is a really talkative person. Now, I'm not talking about anybody in this room particularly, but when a person talks to you a whole lot and it's really fast, there's not a lot to comprehend from that. In the same way, your system can get overheated and stop working if there are too many packets transferred at once. This way, hackers can deny you access to your system by completely shutting it down. And no system means no business. Luckily, there is a way to protect against it, but it's pretty vague. You just have to use the right optimal firewall rules. You can ask your IT provider later.
So we've got another breach as well. It was a WordPress breach. So if anyone here does not know what WordPress is, it is a website hosting company, and it's a very popular one at that. A lot of businesses use WordPress to host their website. So it was reported in 2022 that there had been a security vulnerability in their system since 2017 that they just never patched. So at that point, they're not even following cybersecurity, and their system was just vulnerable to everything. So that is not being compliant with PCI. And they're lucky that they didn't have anything come out of it, but things that could have happened, they could have had a data breach, and it would have ended up in probably 7 to 8 digits in fines. And it was also something that could just be dangerous for their business all in all. So things that you could do to minimize risk for something like this is regular security maintenance on the system, automatic security updates, and then penetration testing as well. So penetration testing is basically hiring someone just to try to break into your computer. So it's kind of like this balloon with this pen. The penetration test is just trying to find the vulnerability that is going to pop the balloon. And so it finds every little vulnerability in your computer or in your computer system, and then you get a report of all of them so you can work towards patching them. So ways you can do this is doing regular testing. So by PCI compliance, you're required to do it at least once a year, and it's recommended you do it with a third party, so someone other than your internal or external IT provider, just to minimize any potential bias. And bi-weekly phishing tests as well to make sure your employees stay on their toes. And then finally, again, making sure that firewall rules stay up to date.
Right. So, in conclusion, what should you take from this, really? First off, if you deal with credit or debit card information, you must be compliant. A $5,000 to $10,000 fine doesn't sound like something I can afford. I certainly wouldn't wish that upon a small business. So, to be compliant, you must be cyber secure. In this way, compliance is a very strict program. But it's important to realize that just because compliance means that you're cyber secure doesn't mean that cybersecurity means compliance. And you can still be fined for not meeting the requirements of compliance.